This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm David McDonald.
I'm Sam Merciers.
And I'm Nate Blyton.
And this week we're joined by composer and friend Ben Fuhrman, who is also the host of the new SoundNotion TV show Patch In, along with Nate Blyton, who is also a host on SoundNotion here. Thanks for being on the show, Ben.
Well, thanks for having me, Patrick.
So Patch In has gone through, 3 or 4 episodes now, right?
3 officials and 2 betas.
3 officials and 2 betas. Okay, so you kind of got your feet wet. And this is a show about electronic music.
Yes. It's a show about electronic music in all of its wonderful and myriad facets. So from musique concrète, studio manipulation, analog synthesis, electronic synthesis, computer programming, all the way through EDM, dance, trance, house, and if we can do it, dubstep.
What is dubstep, Ben? Also, what is EDM? Because after the show, we were chatting after the show last week, and I said EDM, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but somebody on the show said, what is EDM?
Well, EDM is electronic dance music. It's just kind of the general catch-all term for dance music that you would have. Typically, house, trance, techno, all of that falls under that category. Also, according to some sources, so does DJing and manipulating of existing tracks to do mashups or something like that.
So this is music that accompanies glow sticks.
Typically, yes.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Glow sticks, ketamine, and crystal. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Precisely.
We at SoundNotion do not endorse the use of glow sticks.
but we're fine with
You thought I was going to say something else. See what I did there? So, Ben, how tell us a little bit about how the show's been going. Who have you been talking to?
Well, we've had a lot of guests on so far, 5 of them. Well, technically 6. We started off by talking to our good friend Ty Forker about being a performer of pieces that frequently use live electronics and sound manipulation through Max MSP or Ableton Live.
So what you're saying is pieces that frequently break.
Well, the pieces that I've written don't frequently break,
Exactly.
but yes. Then we've also talked to composers like Mark Snyder from University of Mary Washington, Jason Bolte from University of Montana, and in our last episode, which just aired this week, we talked to Ron Quivila and Paula Mathewson, or as Nate and I are referring to them, 2/3 of the composition faculty at Wesleyan University.
So what are they doing?
Well, they are hosting the Seamus Conference this year, is the big deal. But they also are doing a lot with interactive works based on David Tudor's Rainforest 4. They're doing a presentation of that. And they're doing a lot of other really cool projects, including socialization of music and kind of talking about and playing with the idea of how the space in which music is heard influences perception. So they've got a really cool piece that they're going to be doing in a parking garage currently.
Nice.
Cool.
That sounds very exciting. So, what is your goal for Patch In? Why are you bringing your electronic music knowledge to bear on the whole of the internet?
I think in part, and Nate will probably agree with me on this, it's because there are a lot of misconceptions about electronic music. That it's primarily noise, that it's just dance music, that dance music is not technically electronic music, that it's a separate genre, and we must keep them completely separate under all circumstances, period. It's not an academic, therefore we can't do it. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of to correct some of these misconceptions, to show that there are things that people can latch onto in electronic music, no matter what the type. That you can listen to the George Harrison experimental album, or you can listen to Revolution Number 9 and hear how that draws from elements of the Beatles and from classical Indian music that he was into. That you can listen to Pierre Henry or Schaeffer and get an idea of how sampling was first used and manipulated to create the album The Well-Tempered Microphone, and how that would later become sampling as we know it and love it today. Or you could even listen to things like Deadmau5 and get an appreciation for sidechain compression and how that's used in dance music, and then how you as a composer or a listener can use that in your own work or identify it and kind of sort of move away from companies that insist on using ridiculous amounts of compression on all of their output and start demanding real sounding audio and an end to the loudness wars.
That's interesting. So one thing that I think is interesting, you kind of touched on there, is that electronic music, I think as much as any other kind of music, at least that we talk about on the show on SoundNotion and on the SoundNotion network, exists in this nebulous space between classical music, art music, and popular music, where there's so many of the tools that we use to make classical electronic music are the same as the tools that we use to make popular electronic music, and there's a lot of crossover. We see composers that have a part of their career making concert music and then a part of their career as DJs, and they have a like a DJ name sometimes even, and we see some of them getting very successful in both of those worlds. We've talked about Mason Bates on the show before, who does a lot of both of those things, and we see more and more composers that are taking advantage of pop music tools like Ableton Live in their music. What do you think of that? Because when we talked about the people you've had on the show, those have all been pretty straight ahead Stockhausen, Darmstadt school people, right?
Some of them, yeah. I know Mark Snyder and Jason Bolte are very influenced in their current work by pop music. Jason in particular, a lot of his pieces will begin with some sort of electronic Stockhausen-esque set of sounds, but in a lot of his current work, like Child's Play, they will come into this danceable rhythm and approach something that you might not hear at a club, but you can at least pick out a beat and understand it in the same terms as club music.
So, Ben, you seem pretty knowledgeable. Why do you need a co-host? What is Nate's job there?
To keep me on track, hopefully.
I just said that because we've been talking about the show and Nate hasn't said anything.
Well, I was going to point out, so we do, we dive into the technical a certain amount, and we talk about the artistic merit of this music that might be considered either noise or pop music or something like that. But I'd really encourage you to check out this past episode that we did last week with Ron and Paula, because in addition to talking about the links between these different kinds of music, when we talk with with great minds like Ron and Paula, we can talk about expanding just the mode of interacting with electronics. Mm-hmm. They talked a lot about using speakers as instruments and using and playing with speaker arrays in a room and having that be a lot of the art. And which is a really different experience than you might get going to a club, where it's either loud and really present, or the goal is to be like, you don't really know where the speakers are coming from, you're just there to have that experience and everything, which is like, so I see that a little bit in a popular context, but it's interesting to hear these really well-educated and well-studied people exploring and expanding the boundaries of what you can do with speakers in space and things like that.
Yeah, and I should say, I have seen all the Patchin episodes because I produced the show, but I'm not really on it, and so I always learn something on the show, which is fun.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anything about that stuff. You guys are...
I would like to say that... we featured Du Yun on the show before, and she actually has a lot. She goes into the pop world quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With her music, I think she's found this really fantastic use of electronics and in what one might consider more of a classical setting, but with singers, instrumentalists that often will play it in a pop style. You brought up Deadmau5 earlier. I wanted to ask you about this. I think it was he who had written a blog post a while ago about
play.
Yes, he did.
Yes. So
Right.
can you talk about maybe the live performance element a little bit of electronic music, especially in the context of, dubstep artists or trance house, whatever it may be? Because I want to know, like, is he just kind of going over the edge when he says these things about? Well, I mean, you can talk about it, but I mean, I don't know. I'd like to think there was something more to it, but maybe there isn't, and it's just
and Ben and
all
Nate
for
are
show.
both performers.
Right, and so Ben, I'll be interested to hear your ideas about this. But to me, like electronic music, maybe more than any other kind of thing, any other kind of instrument or medium, there's a huge range where there are people that like prepare the tracks, go up and press play, and set up a whole playlist and just kind of dance behind the board as it's going. And I think, but then even people who use pre-made tracks, there's a whole art to playing, kind of doing EQ, doing a teeny bit of remixing as it goes, and really trying to respond to a crowd in that way and connect with the audience, and making some of those formal decisions real time as to when changes might happen depending on how the group is going. And then with stuff like Ableton Live and Max MSP, Ableton Live more so than most software, just because of how accessible it is and how easy it is to really dig in to have all these different kind of sounds at your fingertips. You can really take things in a really different direction really suddenly. And
so there is a live composition element that you can manipulate.
I think
there can be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just to give our listeners some background, when you go to a academic presentation of electroacoustic music, you typically have the same experience no matter where you go. You have a bunch of speakers set up in whatever configuration around the hall, and when they start the piece...
And it's a concert hall, we should say. Like, there's a stage that normally people would stand on.
Yeah, although I have been to a couple of concerts that they've had in bars that were really cool.
Or even like a black box theater, that happens sometimes too.
Yeah. But generally it is, in fact, a concert hall, tiered stadium seating, all that stuff. And they set up the speakers, they kill the lights, and the composer hits play. And you sit there in the dark listening to this piece.
Yeah. We've all been to those.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
By comparison, if you go and see a DJ or an electronica artist, you typically have a guy at a console, generally on stage or possibly in a corner of the room, maybe even in the center of the room if he's really into it. I know Girl Talk does that occasionally.
Yeah, right.
And you've got a bunch of flashing lights that are typically synced via MIDI or OSC to whatever's going on in the track based on either the click track or some subdivision of that. And it's a really crazy environment, a lot of light, a lot of sound. There might be video projections. There might be whoever the artist is twisting a bunch of knobs, as was brought up, and kind of editing things on the fly. But they're typically not editing the actual music. What they're typically doing is adjusting filters or volume on individual tracks to conform to the room. They've probably soundchecked.
But they are only
kinda
hearing it
just
from one
remixing
section of the room, though. What if you're in a big, huge hall? I've been to pop concerts where there's actually an artist. I'm thinking of this one at Webster Hall recently, that there was an artist. She plugged in her iPod and played from there, and then just danced around the stage. Now, I think that's kind of crap, to be honest. But I mean, there's the crowd was, excited about it. So what can I really say? She did what she was supposed to do. But I mean, she's only hearing it from the stage. How does she know how to adjust for the room?
But I feel like more and more...
Well, you can and you can't. I mean, sometimes you can hear up on stage and you can hear that things are dying in a certain frequency band based on however many people are in the hall, or you might hear way too many footsteps and you need to cut out a little bit of that low frequency or boost it or whatever. But
yeah, and I think you can see if people are dancing and like kind of do an energy change with the music based on that. Like,
right. But in any event, going back to the Deadmau5 article, he's absolutely right. Everything, for the most part, is pre-composed, set up in Ableton or Pro Tools or whatever your DAW of choice is, and you just hit the space bar. Your entire set is pre-programmed, unless you're an extreme glutton for punishment and are actually creating and remixing a piece on stage.
and believe me, there are a lot of people out there like that really use their time on stage as an improvisational space, using all these tools at their disposal. And so there really is a huge range for what people can do with electronic music live.
Well, and I would say that in that blog post, Deadmau5 points out that the reason that paradigm exists of something like, Patrick, what you're describing, where you just plug in your iPod and hit go, is that it has to be consistent, right? People are paying a lot of money to come to see these shows, and it's got to work flawlessly every time. Not 80% of the time, not 90% of the time, not 97% of the time, but every time has to work. And if the more flexible the set is, the more you're creating on stage, the more improvisatory it is, the greater the chances are that something breaks, something doesn't work. And we've all seen that. I joked when we introduced Ben about pieces that break.
Yeah, right. Pieces that
we've
fail.
all seen that awkward situation, and that, like, we're relatively patient with that. With when there are 50 people or fewer sitting in a university concert hall, and there's a faculty composer and a student composer poking around at a sound system or a laptop.
It really is too bad.
Like, we're pretty patient with that. Pop audiences are not going to be patient with that. Like, you're not going to, like, sit there and wait around for the bong of the Mac to restart, and the way that you are at a university concert.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I
well,
totally understand that. And
Well, when electronics break, they really do break a lot worse than in a live
sure.
an orchestra. You can flub an orchestra line or whatever,
Right.
something like that. But everything going out, yes, that's
we
that's
call that
terrible.
Don Juan typically.
Right. I just want to reiterate, though, that there is a range with this, and like, the analogy that I use is like electronic musicians. They're using this technology that's generally pretty new, and that, like, an interface that they might continue to adjust and make changes to as they get new gear and try different things out. Like, I just dream for the day that someday I would have enough practice with a certain rig to be comparable to, like, a drummer who's been practicing on the drum set for the last 20 years or something like that. The consistency that drummer might be able to pull off, like playing the beat, doing it perfectly every time on stage, if I could get to that level, which I think is possible. It just takes practice and time
I think I saw
that
a
people don't
video.
usually afford. And I think that would be, like, that's the thing that doesn't happen. And that's, I think, why people press play with electronic music.
Right. Well, and there was also another article. I don't know if it was in the Deadmau5 or it might have been someone else. The point that was made, though, was that it's interesting when you look at the sales of dance music versus the concert sales. People aren't buying a lot of dance music to listen to on their iPod or in one of those antiquated physical formats. They're going to the shows instead, and it becomes more about the experience of the show than about the actual music itself.
Yeah,
the
and
music is there as a vehicle for the experience, which
Right.
I know Simon Emerson talks about quite a bit in his book on understanding electronic music.
Which I think it's not a negative thing either. It's just a different set of priorities where it not necessarily selling this physical media. And I know a lot of electronic artists just have their stuff available online, like on SoundCloud or something. So you can hear it and like, oh man, I want to go dance that and see how it would be live, feeling the energy in a room with that kind of music. And so then they go to the show.
Yeah, and I was going to mention something about this earlier when Patrick, you mentioned the artist just plugging in and dancing around, and I wouldn't discount the importance of the dancing around part. Like the stage, it is a stage show, and
I
can
totally see that.
A lot of contemporary, a lot of big time EDM artists today do some really elaborate stage shows. We even talked on this show about Kanye West's Yeezus tour and how elaborate and in a lot of ways avant-garde even his stage production was. And there's a lot of really interesting things in the production part of EDM shows. One of my students sent me a link a couple of months ago to a video of an Amon Tobin show that had this crazy built-out set that the artist was a part of. Like his DJ booth was just a part of the set, and then there were these crazy projections that were happening across this weird, craggy, three-dimensional set thing. And that was really cool. And he wasn't really moving around and dancing he was, but it wasn't like he was doing stuff all over the stage. He was just in his little booth, but there was a lot of visual stuff that was happening that was layered in with what he was already doing. And I think that's a pretty important part of the experience of EDM, especially the live experience of EDM.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And you're starting to see that, in fact, in other...
sorry, Sam, what were you going to say?
Okay. Go, Ben.
I was going to say you're starting to see that in some other contexts, too. There was the recent Met Opera version of the Ring Cycle that had the famous moving floors, and you're starting to see more projection use in classical music as well. So it's something that the classical world is starting to take from the pop world and to realize that maybe the model of orchestral performances is a little outdated, and we need to finally start moving away from that as well. Which I, for one, welcome our new interactive overlords.
Who are they?
So, anyone who starts engaging with the audience in ways other than just saying, sit down, be quiet, and watch this performance.
You guys mentioned girl talk.
Sam, you need to turn your volume up or something.
You guys mentioned girl talk earlier. How's that?
A little better.
How's that?
Much
That's
better.
good.
Go.
There we go.
Okay. You guys mentioned girl talk earlier, and it's funny. You can watch shows of his on YouTube where he has a thing that looks like, an old 60s cigarette girl, like the thing that's hanging from her waist, like a flat board with a laptop on it.
Yeah.
And he gets down and moshes it up with the crowd. I don't know what he's doing to manipulate the noise, but he's giving them that, guitar player thrashing around in the audience live music vibe to the crowd that's there for the show.
It's like it's like an EDM keytar.
Exactly. And so this is the other thing that you can get. If you come and watch Patchin, we dig into the technical things of what kind of gear they're using as they achieve these different musical things as well. So yeah.
I was going to say that's one of my favorite parts of Patchin is that it's unapologetically geeky. Yeah. And you guys dig into technical stuff, and we're not afraid to get into that. And I think it's delightful to hear you guys, talk shop on Super Collider with Sam Pluta or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That was cool. And we're doing our best to bring the audience along too, connect it with, not just completely dive into the different language and everything.
Right.
On the far other side of the spectrum from like the Dead Mouse article talking about you plug in and hit play are DJs that actually are spinning vinyl, where it divorces itself from that to the point where it becomes sort of virtuosity for virtuosity's sake. You can find plenty of stuff on YouTube where it's a live show, but it's really a technical demonstration of how well this guy can do beat juggling and that kind of thing, where you're mixing two different tracks that you've matched the time, and it's a very, it's like a Paganini violin experience,
exactly.
And it's about the virtuosity, not as or equally as much as the music,
It's a real performance, right?
You guys need to get
It's
a
like
DJ on there.
Yeah. It's like the scratch artists now use the kind of simulated record turntables.
Sometimes,
yeah, an interface for controlling software in a computer Or like, I mean, they even have CD turntables that do that kind of thing too.
Well,
And I've talked to a couple of different DJs, and it seems to be you either love or you hate the controllers.
Yeah.
They tend to be either really pro vinyl or really pro controller, and there's nowhere in between that I've seen yet.
I can imagine missing, like, just that feel of vinyl or something, you know.
But
I've never scratched myself, but you know.
But if you have a way to simulate that effect, but then you can create any sample you want and then make it into something that's scratchable, to me, that's an intriguing possibility.
Yeah, a lot of these guys make their own vinyl now too.
Right.
But Nate, you mentioned when I talked about the show getting a little geeky sometimes, you said you try to bring the audience along with you. And we were just talking about this before the show. The closing segment of Patch In is that awesome 2-minute challenge thing. So can you guys explain what's going on with that?
Well, I guess, it kind of is what it sounds like. We got 2 minutes or 120 seconds to try to explain some technical thing with electronic music. And Ben, what did you talk about this past week?
I did a very, very brief introduction to audio filtering.
So if you've ever heard people talk about high pass and low pass filters or band pass or notch filters and wondered what the heck are they talking about, you should watch the 2-minute challenge from Patch In this week because Ben explained it all.
Those are the virtual controls in your multi-tracking program that you twist up and down a lot to see what happens.
Right, exactly.
I don't really understand it. I just do it and then listen. I don't like that. And then you try it the other direction. I don't like that.
The cutoff resonance, something with these things. I don't know. Exactly. And
so now you can twiddle knobs with confidence.
Yes.
Show title.
Is it time? Should we move into the stories for the week?
I think so. Check out Patch In.
We should just give a little plug to all the cool parts as well.
Oh yeah, we should get Anthony on the show sometime. But in addition to launching Patch In just a couple of months ago as a monthly show, monthly video and audio show, just like this show, Patch In is available in video and audio formats. We are also just launched just the same week. I guess launch is not the right word. We're helping to relaunch Anthony Landman's show. He's a composer and a guitarist, and he's a really cool, interesting guy. And it's going to be an interview-based show. It's audio only, and we're really happy to be working with him. And we're going to have him on to talk about his vision for the show. But you can check out Patch In at soundnotion.tv/PI. You can check out Anthony's new show, All the Cool Parts, at soundnotion.tv/ACP. All the Cool Parts. And he's going to be doing that show every month as well. So we've got some great new stuff going up on the site. And that was a nice little house ad that I just did there. You guys like that?
Yes.
High five.
So, boom. Now can we talk about the news stories? Now that I'm done with the uncomfortable self-promotion.
So what's going on in the world of new music?
I don't know. You tell me.
What about regular music?
New music?
What about new things?
What are we doing here? So you remember this story that we've been talking about for like ever?
Way too long. Way too much.
Yeah, a little. Some would say too much. Considering that we are composers and orchestras don't do a lot of new music. But over the last 15 months or so, we have talked about the Minnesota Orchestra lockout about 11 billion times. And we're not going to talk about it at least not in the present tense for at least 3 years now. The Minnesota Orchestra musicians and board have reached an agreement. The lockout has ended.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yay!
Dun, 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 dun,
Some people
dun.
seem to have even gotten what they wanted out of the deal. The 15-month lockout is over, and it was a rough 15 months. There was a lot of nasty things said in the press from both sides about the other side. There was a lot of activism from the audience, which is always very interesting and I think kind of exciting that the audience is getting involved and that the community is getting involved in these kinds of discussions. But it was a long long lockout. The Minnesota Star Tribune, has said that it's the longest lockout, the longest labor stoppage in U.S. orchestra history. I can't think of any that are longer. So I can't really argue with them. But a lot of bad things happened to the orchestra during this time. They lost huge chunk of the orchestra. A lot of people left to go take other jobs.
And their high dollar conductor.
And they lost their wonderful music director, Ozma Vanska. Exactly.
Well, so that's the big question, though. There still is no word if he is returning or not.
It's true. Somebody asked him on Facebook, and he said, "Well, we'll see. They have to ask me first." So Facebook making the announcements in the classical music world.
Sounds.
I don't know.
We'll see. I'm wearing a soccer jersey.
Because he's from Europe. They all wear soccer jerseys all the time, right?
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Only they call them football jerseys and fish and chips and lorries. And so, anyway, we'll see. He was originally contracted, I think, through the end of the 2014-2015 season, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. I think he got out of his contract, but we'll see if they're still interested in him. They should be, because he was wonderful and brought the orchestra to levels that it had never reached before, or at least as great as they had ever been before. But they have a new 3-year collective bargaining agreement. They're going to start playing again February 7th, so just a couple of 3 weeks from now. Musicians agreed to about a 15% cut in their total compensation between their direct pay and their benefits. And they said in their publicity, the musicians said that they really had a strong intention in the negotiations to keep the orchestra in the top 10 orchestras in the country by compensation, which seems weird to me. It seems like a strange and kind of vain goal. What difference does it make if you're the 9th best compensated orchestra or the 14th best compensated orchestra? But whatever. It's like the fight between the Ohio State football stadium and the Michigan football stadium, where if one of them adds a few seats, then the other one has to go add a few seats so they can fight over which is the biggest between the.
Speaking of adding or losing seats, an important thing that Drew McManus, friend of the show, Drew McManus.
You need to speak up or something. You're quiet every time you start.
I was fine earlier. I don't know if Skype is doing something crazy. I'm jacking it right now.
Sounds good.
You're good now.
Friend of the show, Drew McManus, points out that while both sides, management and labor, agree that a 95 musician roster is the, quote, optimal size, the agreement only calls for 77 full-time musicians, which it doesn't explicitly say, but I get the impression that's less than they had previously.
Well, so they're going to start at 77, but by the end of the 3-year CBA, they're supposed to get back up to 84. And I don't know if 84 is more or less than they had before, but they are going to grow.
It doesn't lay out any plans for getting there and has no timetable other than that one thing that by this time they will be up there.
They also, the musicians wanted some change in the leadership of the MOA, the Minnesota Orchestra Association. It's crazy, but they got rid of board chair John Campbell, but they did not get rid of the guy that seemed to take the most heat from the musicians and the community throughout the negotiations and throughout the lockout. Michael Henson, the CEO and president of the MOA, is still there, which seems crazy, but they just I don't understand. But he's still staying, even though he seemed to, at least as I saw it, take the bulk of the criticism. What I think another really interesting thing is that they have a revenue sharing agreement, and we don't know the details of the revenue sharing agreement. You mentioned Drew McManus, his analysis of the agreement. That's just based on the press statements that have been made by the musicians and the MOA separately. So we still don't really know what the contents of the CBA are. But as soon as that comes out, we'll look for some analysis from people like Drew and from the musicians union blog, whose name escapes me at the moment, but we'll be looking for some analysis from those people once that CBA becomes public. It is currently, as far as I know, on Sundays we're recording this, it's not available, but we're hoping that somebody will make it available soon.
Hey guys.
What?
Hey guys.
What's that?
Guess who else is coming back?
Who?
New York City Opera Orchestra.
Wait, so
What?
the opera or the orchestra? I'm confused. You're confusing
The
me,
orchestra.
Patrick. Because operas have
orchestra.
singers and orchestras don't.
Orchestras can have singers,
Thank
and there will
goodness.
be singers at this one concert that they are coming back for on February 21st, which would have been the 70th anniversary of New York City Opera, featuring a former New York City Opera music director, George Manahan, who we know now as the music director of the American Composers Orchestra. This is a concert that will basically provide funds to the local 802 for musicians in need, with tickets ranging from $25 to $250. And it's basically I don't know.
What's on the
I don't
show?
know
What's on the
what to make of this
program?
concert. They play the hits, okay? They're playing the hits.
You got to tell me more. What hits are we talking about? We talking about?
Well,
It
let's see.
doesn't give a list of
Sorry,
the-
I don't have.
I don't know if anybody knows. Is it like one of these
Right.
surprise things where you show up and they play?
Okay. Here we go. Selections from the Ballad of Baby Doe, Candide, L'Etoile, Julius Caesar, X, Martha, and Die Todesstadt.
All right, I'm in.
I like Candide.
I'm in. So it's interesting that they are doing this show not for proceeds to like resurrect City Opera,
Yes.
but
I don't think anybody would fall for that.
I don't think anybody would fall for that, but I think there's probably something in the back of everyone's head that's like, oh, wow, that was a really great concert, and I have $5 billion. Maybe.
Yeah.
I will
Well,
give
they would
Well, that's
need to
what-
charge like $1.7 million a ticket. Then maybe they'd be in business.
well, that's what I think is interesting about this is that if they can get some energy around the idea of bringing this thing back from nothing, that it could actually be some community energy and some work developing an audience relationship again that kind of got destroyed last fall. That maybe something like a resurrection of City Opera could be happening, but that operas are expensive. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see. I have no transition here.
Yeah, I don't.
Oscar nominations are in.
Oscars.
Yes,
We got
for
some.
people who care.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting nominations. We have John Williams for The Book Thief, Stephen Price for Gravity, William Butler and Owen Pallett for Her, Alexander Desplat for Philomena, and Thomas Newman for Saving Mr. Banks. Pretty interesting. As far as I know, Desplat and Newman have never won the Oscar for Best Score, despite being nominated about a gajillion times. And John Williams has all the nominations ever, and at least a third of the Oscars.
Is the most nominated Oscar person have been nominated for the most Oscars just behind Walt Disney?
Really?
Wow.
Like,
Yes, I believe.
like
so.
as in Walter Disney, like the guy. That's amazing.
Walter. Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
Walter,
there's some-
surely
maybe-
his parents didn't name him Walt. He's Walter.
I don't
His
know.
mother
Is he-
yells at him and calls him Walter.
Damn
Walty.
it, Walter. Let me wait. Walter
Walter W.
Walter
Disney.
Elias Disney.
That's what
Everybody's
she
middle
yells at
initial
him.
is W, as far as I'm concerned. More fun to say that way. So I don't remember who brought this next story to our attention. Is this something that was shared with us on Facebook?
Yeah, we got this one from a viewer.
So note to
about
everybody watching: use a hashtag SN Weekly, and you can contribute to the show.
And we might just talk about something like this. Left Field Labs has put out an interesting project. You can go and use their web interface to build your very own 3D printed music box with a custom tune. They've got a pretty neat thing. It's like a 16 by 16 matrix or something like that. That you click in the notes and then you put your name, choose a color, and then they send you a music box printed using a 3D printer, and it's with your custom tune. So if you ever wanted to have your very own music box with your own special little composition or something, they've got a pretty good interface for it. Check it out, Left Field Labs.
Yeah, Dave, or you show a picture, Dave, because that's.
I don't have a picture of it, but we'll link to one.
Well,
Yeah.
it's an elegant-looking little device in the article. It's like a teardrop shape with part of it cut away, and it's a little hand crank. So it's not like a wind it up and let the spring do the work for you. So I guess it's an added feature is we'll call it enhanced tempo control.
Exactly.
Since you control the speed of the crank yourself.
And who is it that shared this with us? I was looking for it. I didn't see it.
There's a fabulous pianist I know named Dutcher.
Right. So
Yep.
Dutch, I was thinking that we said you should use our hashtag and we'll put it on the show. And I thought, well, we should probably credit them then.
Yeah.
That's right.
So thank you, Dutcher, for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Music Man 1. Thanks again.
And
A couple of obituaries this week. One is a little older, but we missed it when it first happened. Jim Hall, if you don't know, I was a big fan of Jim Hall, a really innovative jazz guitarist who certainly was a virtuoso, but in a time when sort of jazz guitar playing in the 80s and 90s was very much either all about virtuosity or kind of like schlocky, crossover pop jazzy kind of stuff. He had a really original sounding voice. And Jim Hall passed away, I think, early in January. So rest in peace, Jim Hall. And H. Owen Reed also on January 6th, which if you played in an honors band, if you played a band instrument and you played an honors band in high school, then you have to have played some H. Owen Reed music. And
103.
103, born in 1910.
That's
Lived
crazy.
through both world wars.
So who picks up the scepter here as the oldest?
I don't know.
I mean,
is that really something we measure?
I don't know.
know.
I feel like it's a thing to talk about.
There's a lot of people.
There are a lot of people.
There's
Reed
about
was on
7
the-
billion of them.
Right.
Reed was on faculty at MSU, Michigan
Go
State,
Spartans.
from 1939 till 1976.
Wow.
Also, Dave, did you know his undergrad was at Mizzou? Just in case you didn't
Go
realize.
Tigers.
So you have two connections there.
There you
It's
go.
always goes something with you.
I
man.
love university nicknames. They're one of my favorite things to collect in my head. So we are gonna leave the show there. We're gonna. So what I want to do, our pick of the week this week, is going to be H. Owen Reed's probably most well-known piece, at least among that honors band set that Sam mentioned, La Fiesta Mexicana. But I think the best thing to do is just to use it as kind of an outro thing after we wrap the show. But it's if you've not heard it, you should. If you have played, as Sam said, in a wind band growing up, you've probably played it a bunch of times, or at the very least heard it. It's
Hard
not.
clarinet part.
It's I think it's very accessible, but it's also very interesting and introduced a lot of new concepts to young musicians. It's one of these. He's one of those composers that was, for a lot of musicians growing up, one of their first experiences with music by living composers, contemporary music. So it's really, I'm glad that we thought to give him some attention today, and that we're gonna share some of his music in case any in our audience had not heard it before. So that's going to be La Fiesta Mexicana. Ben, before you go, first of all, thank you for joining us. Ben joined us on about an hour's notice. We had a last-minute cancellation. So thank you, Ben, for being with us. Do you have anything that you want to plug aside from Patchin soundnotion.tv/pi, which we have plugged extensively already.
Oh, yes, we have. I'm trying to think. Besides Patchin, you can always check out my work with the band Wasal at wasalmusic.com, or my current work as a composer at benfurman.com. I'm currently in the process of finishing up a piece for Will Sokola for bass clarinet and live computer processing. And as soon as that's done, I need ideas for the next piece. So,
composer for hire.
I was thinking and a good idea might be to find somebody to pay you to write a new piece.
I think
that's my idea.
I've
given it to you for free.
Write an opera.
There you go. Operas. Those are hip.
Yep.
So, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined us live on the stream. If you would like to watch our show live, we do stream the show live at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Sundays. That's 11 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, maybe like, I don't know, 1600 UTC, something like that. I don't know. But you can figure out your time zone situation. If you're not able to watch us live, that's totally fine. This show and all our shows are available on demand on whatever device you like to watch your shows on, and you can check them out at soundnotion.tv/SN for this show, and our other shows will be there as well. If you would like to connect with us, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes. You can follow us on Facebook, or you like us on Facebook. You follow us on Twitter, and you subscribe to us on YouTube. Those are all the right verbs in the right places. So you should do those things and connect with us. You can use hashtag SNWeekly if you have an idea for something that you think would be cool for us to talk about on the show. We check that out on Twitter and Facebook when we're putting the show together every week. And we're always happy to share cool stories that our audience has shared with us, like we did today with the sweet 3D printed music box. And if you would like to find a link to the sweet 3D printed music box, you can find those on our site as well, soundnotion.tv/SN. If you'd like to support our show, you can go use the Amazon affiliate search box on the right side of our site. It doesn't change anything about your Amazon order, but if you search for the thing that you're already going to buy through our little thing, we get a commission. And thank you to everyone who did that over the Christmas holidays. That was very nice of you. We really appreciate it. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gullo and video by Tyler Lepp. Thanks again so much for watching or listening, and we will see you back next week.